one of the main issues we're all dealing with right now as a result of the Common Core is this idea of close reading. When we got to this part of the book, we thought we will actually have to attend to this notion of close reading because it looks like it's something that's just been invented by the architects of the Common Core state standards. Actually, we don't think there's ever been a time in which teachers did not want students attending to a text closely, really focusing on a part and thinking deeply about what it means. What we tried to do in this section right here is talk about how you help a student learn to read a text closely at an independent level. One of our concerns about close reading as defined by the architects of the Common Core is that we achieve close reading when the teacher carefully guides students through a text, a short part of a text if it's a longer piece, by asking a series of questions that focus the student on very particular issues and push them deeper and deeper into the text. And that absolutely will help a kid read a text at a very close level. However, that requires that there's always an English teacher close by when you want to read something closely, because it was the English teacher who asked those questions. I'm thinking of the article title that Bob's often told me I want to write an article, and I told him you don't need the article, you just need the title. And the title is, there ain't always going to be an English teacher around when you need one. And you've talked about that for a very long time, that what we've got to create are independent readers. And independent reading really doesn't have anything to do with how many words per minute you can read and how quickly you can decode accurately words that are in front of you. Independent means knowing what to do when the text is tough, mostly because of the content, but perhaps also because of some surface features. And so when we think about close reading, we like the idea of going deeper and deeper into the text, but we want to push kids to do that by teaching them some habits of mind that they can use on their own. And so that led us, after you've read...
One more thing about
really?
close reading. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't do it all?
No, you didn't
do
it
okay,
all.
I thought so. It was so good.
The notion of close reading, it's almost a metaphoric expression. It suggests that you get close to the text, perhaps. You stay close to it. Sometimes I think that has been interpreted to mean you remember a lot about it, you learn all of the significant and insignificant details it's presented. And I'm not sure that that's what the notion of close reading is really striving to obtain. It seems to me that what we're talking about is responsible reading. And responsible reading is reading in which you don't impute to the author ideas that are your own. You may have a response, you may disagree with the author, but you are conscientious about distinguishing between what you have brought to the text and what the text has brought to you. And you don't try to confuse that issue. The essence, it seems to me, of close reading is responsible reading. And the essence of responsible reading is engaged and attentive reading that attempts to make the best sense possible out of the text, bring it to bear upon the world in the best possible way.
I actually love that, but I think that what you're really doing is bringing up the notion that close reading that is based strictly on questions that can be answered in the text won't ever get to that level of responsibility that you're suggesting.
Which gets us into the next chapter, really, of text-dependent questions.
Okay, so, well, I think that's right, but I think that you're really, this is a critical point, that we're at a time in our pendulum swings of educational ideas that are really taking us back to this 1950s, 60s, 70s, saying that answers to questions about the text should only be found within the text. And that as we hunt for those answers, then we're reading closely. And those questions are part of, and you're right, are part of what's being called now text-dependent questions. And so you're exactly right, Bob, that really is why the next part we picked up in the book is this notion of, do text-dependent questions really foster engagement? I'd love for you to start this by giving a little bit of your conversation on how it is you define a text-dependent question.
The danger in the term, it seems to me, is that it may encourage teachers to write the kinds of questions that I used to write when I was first teaching English. I would carefully craft this long series of questions that I thought inductively moved the student from confusion to certainty, that would take him through a text and lead him to the light at the end of the tunnel. And they all had to do, usually, with something in the text. What does this particular image suggest? What does this change in point of view tell you? That sort of question. Now, the problem with these questions, it seems to me in retrospect, were they were all mine. They weren't the kids' questions. They weren't bad questions, but they didn't belong to the kids. And yet, I have learned since that if I give students the opportunity to focus on confusing or troubling or intriguing parts of a text, they will generate many of those same questions, and others that are better still.
So and they're almost always text dependent.
And they almost always are,
right,
because the child will come upon a passage and say, I don't understand this, and the question that emerges from that confusion is about the text. What is this? Maybe it's very specific. What does this word mean? Or maybe it's a little more inferential. What is the author trying to do by presenting me with these notions at this point? But when the text-dependent question is the child's, I could almost argue that it's dependent not just upon the text, but it's dependent upon the reader's transaction with the text. Why did the text evoke this response in me? Why did this element in the text confuse me or irritate me or amuse me or satisfy me? I had a reaction to the text, and I want to know what accounts for it. The answer to that text-dependent question is likely to be there's something there in the text that shaped your response, and there's something in you that you brought to the text that contributed to the shaping of that response. If this element in the text confused you, it's because you don't understand something, or you understand something in a different way. If this element in the text irritated you, it's because the author said something, but it's also because you have a contrary point of view that
makes you say you don't agree with that.
Yeah, with which the author's point of view butts up against in a certain way. So the text-dependent question that is the student's is a very powerful and interesting question. The text-dependent question that is just mine is an exercise in searching for something for the student, quite likely.
Well, and leading the student to your aha, or perhaps even the textbook's aha. Yeah. And our concern is that an over-reliance on text-dependent questions that the teacher creates, in all likelihood will create a generation of teacher-dependent kids. We want kids creating questions about the text. And we actually think that we can help kids learn to do that, which is what they're going to have to do when we're not around. We spend some time on pages 43 and 44 talking about the steps we use to take kids through a process where they are confronted with a difficult text and learn to generate their own questions. One teacher asked us, she said, well, so you don't talk about where the answers come from? No. What we've found is that as students generate those questions and then have small group conversation, then they start generating answers. Now, it's your job as the teacher, as the more skilled person in the classroom, to know when you need to say, I'm not sure that's quite right. Look again at this part. Or, I don't think you guys really understand what ubiquitous means. Why didn't somebody look it up and bring that information to the table? So it's not saying that you just get to step away and let them figure it out. You're there to help scaffold them. I would also encourage you to look pretty closely at pages 45, 46, 47. This is a section that we call Classroom Close-Up. And what we do is take you into a classroom and try to show you how rigor, close reading, dialogic talk, and student-generated text-dependent questions all come together. Because up until this point in the book, we've been talking about big ideas, but in the Classroom Close-Up, we wanted to contextualize it in an actual classroom situation. We think you'll really enjoy that part. Until the next section, I'm Kylene Beers.
And I'm Bob Probst.